Hi there, this is Dr. J. Kent Gregory, and welcome to Chapter 5, the Constitution. There's a lot of really great information in this chapter about the Constitution, and provides a really great introduction to to the Constitution itself and what's contained in it, many of which you all probably already know. But what I thought I'd do is I'd focus on the elements of the chapter that directly affect business. So first thing to keep in mind are Articles of Confederation. So this was the first Constitution of the United States of America, and it established the Union of States. So it preceded the United States Constitution. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And they were added because the Constitution proper is very brief. So, as the authors point out, the Constitution is of the United States is the shortest and oldest written constitution still in force, and its brevity is the reason why it endures today. So, what that has meant is that judicial interpretation of the Constitution has had to keep pace with, or has led to the development of law because of the Constitution's brevity. And judicial interpretation has been necessary as new issues develop, or new legal issues develop. So much of the Constitution deals with the allocation of power among the three separate co-equal branches of government. So the legislature, the judiciary, and then the executive office, which is the presidency. So the Constitution, interestingly, is a document of prohibition. It outlines what the government cannot do as opposed to what the government must do. So that's something worthwhile keep in mind. So it's a document of prohibition. The Constitution remains a document of structure. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Then substantive law. It talks about the separation of powers. Here we have those three here. And the division of enumerated powers of government among the separate branches. And then the judicial branch interprets the Constitution and outlines the powers of the legislature and executive branches. So habeas corpus. This is in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution, and it states that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless, when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. And habeas corpus is the right to seek release from unlawful detention by petitioning a neutral judge. So, habeas corpus, and that comes from the Latin meaning you should have, or you must have, or a body. So there you go. So the key takeaway of this first section is the Constitution is mainly a structural document. Um, and also, Article 1 of the Constitution establishes a bicameral legislature, meaning it has both the House of Representatives and the smaller, more deliberative Senate. Article 2 establishes the executive power of the president. And then another point is that power is also divided between the state and the federal governments under the concept of federalism. The Supremacy Clause, however, states that when there's a conflict between state and federal law wins. So if there's no direct conflict, then state law survives unless Congress expressly preempts state law through through the legislative process. Another key takeaway from the chapter is Article 1, Section 8 grants specific powers to Congress, among which is the power to regulate commerce. Uh, and the power of foreign commerce is explicit, total, and exclusive. So, an example of during the Great Depression, the Supreme Court greatly expanded the interpretation of Congress's ability to regulate domestic interstate commerce. And this expansion led to the congressional authority to regulate virtually all human activity. within the United States. So that was interesting. So that was during the Great Depression. Um, so attempts by judicial conservatives to circumscribe the power of the Commerce Clause uh, have generally failed. And then another point is, unlike the federal government, states have broad police powers to regulate the health, safety, and moral well-being of their citizens. So the exercise of these police powers cannot violate the federal constitution, and importantly, cannot violate the dormant commerce clause, meaning they can't discriminate against or place an undue burden on interstate commerce. So commerce between different states. So that's a good takeaway from that, the middle part of the chapter. And then the final part of the chapter, some takeaways, are the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights provides certain key civil liberties to all Americans and persons on the U.S. soil. So these liberties are never absolute, and they're subject to competing interests that courts must balance in making their decisions. So this is something that will be relevant for business. Another thing that's particularly relevant for business, especially in the election in election years, is the First Amendment. So this prohibits the government from establishing religion and from restricting the free exercise thereof. The First Amendment also prohibits the government from restricting the freedom of speech. So political speech is protected to the fullest extent by the First Amendments, um, while obscene and defamatory speech is not protected at all. Uh, Corporations, due to recent court decisions, have some free speech rights under the corporate speech doctrine. So corporations are treated like people. So generally speaking, states may impose reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on the delivery of speech. However, procedural due process requires that the government use fair procedures anytime it seeks to deprive a citizen of life, liberty, or property. So clearly, these all have business applications, property among them. So substantive due process requires the government to articulate a rational basis for passing laws or when fundamental rights are involved, and to articulate a compelling reason to do so. So that wraps up chapter 5. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you and talk to you soon.